Hi, welcome to the Pharmacy Operators Podcast. Today we have on COO of Nufactor, Leslie Vaughan. Welcome to the show, Leslie.
Thanks, Eesha. I'm glad to be here.
I'm super excited for this talk. We've seen a little bit of what Nufactor looks like on the inside working with them, and there's also a lot of things we've picked up from industry folks about Nufactor's kind of secret sauces around certain things. And one that I want to start with is Nufactor actually has a pretty unusual reputation for very high employee retention for intake in an industry with like 40% turnover rate. It's extremely high. And, I have a friend who's a recruiter who's like, we've tried recruiting out of Nufactor and it's just nobody leaves, which is hard. It's a very hard thing to do. And so, Leslie, I want to learn from you, like, what do you believe is the driver behind this, and how do you set up a system that allows you to do this?
Yeah, that's an easy one, and I would say, Eesha, it's not just our intake team. I mean, we're kind of known for high retention throughout the entire organization, and not a lot of turnover. I think really it comes from just kind of the company in general, right? The focus. And so, key focus for us is the culture of the organization. And we want to make sure that everybody understands, what their roles are, but also everybody understands what we're trying to accomplish, which really is first in class patient care. I think everybody getting that culture and understanding the culture. And then following on to that, I think there's, a fair amount of training that goes in. And so if we support people and train them to do their job effectively, rather than just kind of throwing them to the wolves and saying, figure it out, but, give them time to learn and the support and training and everything necessary to get them to the point where they are successful in their role. I think, people feel good about what they do. They know that they're helping patients. They know that our overall goal is really putting the patient first. So I think, that training, management support, and just overall the culture of the organization of helping healthcare care and putting putting the other thing I'd add is we do try to be pretty consistent on, an annual or maybe every other year basis of doing comp analysis and making sure that we're paying people fairly and staying competitive. So I think that probably helps. It's hard to be lured away when you enjoy the culture and you're also being paid fairly.
I think that's actually much less appreciated than you would think. We've definitely encountered a lot of teams that sort of don't value operations as much, or treat it sort of as a cost center, not as something that can help be a sales tool, actually, like make it so that the provider experience, the patient experience, it all depends on ops and how well that functions. And so it's interesting to see that you guys have really focused on it as sort of an asset, or than like an investment into an asset, rather than just like a cost center that you have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our concept is, everybody's in sales, right? Even somebody who's not really forward facing with patients or with prescribers, somebody packaging something up in the back. If you do a bad job packaging, you're going to have broken product, and that's a bad experience. So I think everybody in the organization knows that they are constantly kind of selling us and our services and just trying to be best in class.
Yeah. I mean, that leads to the great next question. So what does intake excellence mean to you operationally, and how do you measure that and make sure, the team is aligned on really delivering that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to answer intake excellence, right? You could go just straight to, we get all the authorizations timely and we never have a write-off. And I think you could go to that kind of operational function. But I think intake excellence to me means a couple different things. Sure, you want all those, right? We want to make sure that we're efficient and we're operating and we're not writing things off. But I think for us, it's important to establish that relationship with the patient from the get-go. And so, our intake team works with them to help them really understand everything about their benefits. We roll that over to admissions pharmacists to help the patient understand things about their disease state, what to expect. And so intake excellence to me means that the patient has the opportunity to get all their questions answered, and that we're helping educate them in a way that is understandable for them. So being able to kind of modify our approach and making sure that every patient understands what to expect and understands how to reach us, how to get a hold of us, and isn't hit with any surprises kind of farther down, right? We get patients transferred to us who say, I came from X company and I was so surprised when I got a bill for $30,000 because it wasn't authorized. And we don't ever want that to happen. So we want to make sure that patients know what to expect and we don't have those surprises.
So I guess if I was to repeat back, it sounds like a lot of patient empathy is at the heart of it, sort of like understanding where they're coming from, understanding what they've experienced, and sort of making sure they're not hit with things that they've experienced in the past that have burned them, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, kind of talking about culture and I think the culture of the organization, whether it's Nufactor, whether it's our parent company, FFF Enterprises or other subsidiaries, everybody who works for the organization understands that there is a patient at the end of every single transaction. So that's key. We all have missions, visions, values, all those sorts of things. And FFF and all the subsidiaries, we have a tagline, helping healthcare care. And that's really what is, we work to try to make sure that every aspect of the healthcare environment is treated appropriately and fairly.
Yeah.
It's culture, really.
Yeah. I think the kind of part of your culture that I've observed at least is that you guys are very sort of structured, process oriented, very good at kind of planning ahead, making sure that you're taking into account things that are coming up in a way that, is rare, frankly, within the industry. And so what we've heard from recruiters, for example, is you plan hires roughly 3 months ahead of need, which is hard because there's a lot of uncertainty, with things going on. And so what enables that level of foresight? How do you basically make sure that you're able to plan ahead for things that are coming up, but not overdoing it, not overspending, things of that nature?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of ways I could go with this answer, right? If I'm looking at just general hiring, so we're looking to say we know that we're going to need to add a clinical team this year, or we're going to need to add some people in intake. That's really a lot of that is based on data and prior history. So you can get a sense of, this is what it looked like last year and the year before and the year before. And so I think that there are definitely trends that you can follow and say, we know that it's likely we're going to have to add these 3 people this year. We do like to work in advance. I think that helps us be successful is, taking that time to hire somebody in advance, knowing that you really don't need the need for 3 months, but that 3 months gives the person who comes in the seat a chance to be trained and to learn the organization, to learn what they're doing. And really not be thrown out to the wolves, say, here we hired you, go do your job, We want to make sure that everybody understands what their job is and really how we do it. So understanding the Nufactor way. The other way I could answer that is I think if you look at, like, let's say a new drug coming to market, I think for me, we have to be really skeptical on information that is given to us by, say, a manufacturer that says, hey, we have a new drug and, we want you guys to commit to, X volume of product. I think, again, looking at the history, understanding, how payers look at a new drug coming to market, how prescribers look at a new drug coming to market. So I think a lot of it is just really, again, kind of that understanding of prior history, prior trends, and then using data to make sure that what we're putting in place is going to be supported and that we're not overhiring or underhiring. But I do think, for us, we are, I think, a little bit different in that proactive hiring. But if you don't give people time to get fully up to speed in what they do, they're not going to be as successful.
And so I think you sort of touched on this, but let's dig into it a little bit more. Let's say, an operator is operating in a space, they're a little uncertain what the volume volatility will look like, or there's some kind of constraints they're uncertain about. Being skeptical is part of it. So how do you plan for hiring if you don't really know what resources you need?
That's a tough question. I do think a lot of it is, I think, an educated guess. I can give you one example of a program that we were putting in place where the manufacturer believed that it was going to be just a really huge volume. And if we had gone with what they had, what they were forecasting, we would have hired way too many people. And so again, I think there's that little bit of skepticism and that understanding of how a new product to market is going to be received by payers and prescribers. We also, I think we like to take the approach of we will initially hire temps and move temps to perm as the program develops, and that way we're not hiring a bunch of people and putting them in harm's way. I will say also, if a program doesn't develop as we had expected, we're pretty good at looking around the rest of the organization and saying, hey, we have some people here who are and we don't want to put them back out on the street. We want to find a place for them. So the organization as a whole is very supportive of, if for some reason something wasn't going to be as successful, we want to try to find a home for the people who work with us, for our teammates.
Yeah. That's very cool. I think for when we think about, team structure, process, there's within intake sort of discrete steps, and there's also the patient journey end to end. In terms of how you guys have structured it, you have specialists at every single step that are completely dedicated on a very particular part of the patient journey. Why was that the right model for you guys?
I think for us, a couple things. I think, if you have people who specialize you're going to become more efficient. Instead of having somebody who's going to be bouncing back and forth between maybe, doing intake and then focusing on reauthorization or quoted benefits. And so I think for us, it's been important to get people in the positions to really get them fully trained so they understand what their goals are or what their job is, and really can focus on that. I mean, that being said, in a crazy time of year, like right now, the beginning of the year is always crazy for everybody. Everybody jumps in, right? And so, I'm calling and checking benefits, and somebody on re-auth is helping quote benefits to a new patient. So we do have the flexibility to have everybody kind of jump in when things get a little bit crazy. I will say the specialization, I think, is important for us as well as part of that kind of patient journey. So if you have somebody who completely knows their job, what they do, what their function is, they become more effective at sharing that information with the patients and really being able to develop that kind of one-on-one relationship with the patient. And that's important for us really from beginning to end is, we don't want a patient having to call in, we don't want them having to call in once a month. We want to be the ones reaching out to them to say, hey, how's it going? Are you ready for your refill? Any insurance changes, so on and so forth. But if we don't give them a one-to-one relationship, then they have to retell their story every time they talk to us. And that, that doesn't make anybody feel, I think, not importance, but feel like you care. So I think it's important for us to have that one-to-one relationship, which is a little bit why our positions are somewhat siloed in responsibilities.
Yeah. I think from what you just said, though, there's a little bit of a tension where you have specialization, but you also require a lot of communication internally amongst the various specialists within the team. And so that has to come in some way, that has to be done in some way. How do you prevent the specialization from becoming a silo, especially when there's so many roles that touch the patient journey?
I think everybody getting a broad understanding of what other people's responsibilities are. Everybody gets kind of a general orientation. As part of that orientation, they get to spend time with people in other positions. And so to understand, what does an admission pharmacist do? What does a team pharmacist do? In the last year, we've done some kind of internal education where we put it out to the team members to say, hey, we want to make sure that everybody in every department understands what everybody else's department does. Who wants to volunteer and do some training? And so, we try to do kind of internal team building, internal trainings, just to make sure that everybody understands what everybody else's focus is. I think that gives people an appreciation for, hey, somebody didn't get back to me right away, and they might understand, well, they had, 16 phone calls to make today, and that's probably why they couldn't get back to you, within 20 minutes or something along those lines. So I think just a general understanding of what all the different focuses and responsibilities are within the organization.
So I'm going to move into talking about provider and patient experience. We've touched on it in various ways, and we're going to focus a little more on the provider experience. That's obviously a really important one in this industry. We really want to make sure that providers have minimal friction to do whatever they need to do to help get the patients on the therapies they need to. In your case, there's a lot of high-touch provider relationships you develop, a lot of engagement your sales team and your operations team does. How does your operational structure support trust and consistency with providers over time?
Sure. So I'll start, not going to go directly into operations. I'll start with sales and talk a little bit about kind of our thoughts around the prescriber provider relationship. Our goal is to be a resource. So, we don't want to think of our providers or prescribers as transactional. Oh, you sent me a referral. Great. I can chalk that up as one referral. We really want to make sure that we're a resource and help them understand kind of what we do, where we specialize, and take a lot of the burden off of them. So, things like benefits investigation, verification, authorization, working through getting a clean referral at the front so we can avoid denials, but helping them through denials. So really, I think just consistently being a resource. From the operational standpoint, we've done a couple of things, I think, to enhance that, which is really putting teams in place that support the same provider offices over and over and over again. And that way, they don't just have that one-on-one relationship with the salesperson who's out there physically visiting with them, but they have that same interaction or that same thing with a pharmacist or with somebody on intake where they get to know that person who is kind of their intake person. And I think, being able, again, to provide them with us taking some of that administrative burden off of them and keeping it consistent and helping them be able to move their day along without having to do a lot of steps on our behalf.
Sort of hand in hand with the provider relationship is where you choose to focus in terms of specialty and drug, I guess. For the focus of Nufactor, you do a lot of IVIG, you do a lot of rheumatology. Was that a choice of we will do this and not that? And why did that come to be?
Yeah, it is. And so, my boss, who's the CEO of our parent company, FFF Enterprises, I think he says it the best. A lot of people, a lot of companies are a mile wide and an inch deep in their
Mm-hmm.
focus. We're maybe a couple inches wide and miles deep in our focus. And it lets us be the best at what we do. So, we're not trying to be everything to everybody. We're really trying to focus on, a couple of different, not specific disease states, but, practices, a couple of different, medications that go together. So, we're very good at IVIG, sub-QIG. We do a fair amount of monoclonal antibodies. There's a lot of new products that come to market, which frankly, we would like to be able to provide. But, unfortunately, the way things get structured today with, the cost of the product and the way things get reimbursed, a lot of the new products that come to market, there's just no margin.
Mm.
If I'm providing service below my cost, if I'm getting reimbursed below my cost to procure the drug, I'm not going to be able to provide the level of service that we provide for very long.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I'm still not sure about that.
So I guess the interesting thing also related to this is being transparent with providers on what you can and can't do. And I guess you guys have a very sort of genuine relationship with the providers and sort of use this within your operations, your sales. People basically are aligned on what needs to happen within the team and sort of educate the provider on that. How did that come to be? Was it just something that emerged as you worked with providers? Like how did that structure emerge?
I think it's just a matter of kind of who we are as an organization. Patient focused, wanting to make sure that we're providing the top level care. So in order for us to be that, we've got to be transparent with everybody. So, we've got to be transparent with providers, with manufacturers, with patients, and again, not trying to say anything bad about any of, my competitors, but, we've seen situations where referrals come over to us and it says, oh, we're out of network. And it's like, well, it's Medicare. You're either, you have a provider number or you don't. You're not in work or out of network. So for us, it just makes a lot more sense for us to be very transparent with prescribers to say, hey, we would love to provide this, but we can't because we don't have access, or we would love to provide this, but unfortunately, the way this is reimbursed, it costs us more to buy the drug than it would for the payer to reimburse us. So it's just easier for us to be honest, and you don't have to keep track of lies, right? As long as you're honest, you don't have to say, well, what did I tell that person, and try to build on it. So it's just easier to be transparent. And I guess, I have conversations with manufacturers where they say, you are far and away the most transparent organization we work with. And my comment back to them is it doesn't do me or you any good for us not to be transparent with each other. So if we all don't know what's coming or what to expect, again, nobody likes surprises. So transparency is just the easiest way. That way you don't have to remember what you said because you said the truth.
Makes sense. For frontline teams that are balancing clinical operational rigor with this relationship-based service that your sales team enables and your operations enables, how do you do that in a scalable way? It's a lot of communication with the providers, a lot of relationship building, and it's hard as you build up your business. There's so many patients, there's so many providers. How do you manage that?
Yeah, so I think that's where we're coming. I think making some changes in the next couple of years. I mean, we're obviously working with you guys to help us be more scalable. If you don't get some technology solutions in place, the ability to scale becomes very, very challenging. So working with you guys to help us kind of automate repetitive steps and, opens up time for the intake team or the pharmacy team or even the sales team to be having those voice to voice or face to face interactions rather than banging on keys. So, IT enhancements, technology enhancements, innovation, I think is going to be key to our ability to continue to sustain growth. So we're kind of in a growth and technology year this upcoming year.
Cool. It's a very exciting time to be in it, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is.
From a leadership perspective, and this kind of touches on what you're thinking about in terms of setting up tech, setting up systems. You've designed, people and process really well, and now you're getting into the tech side of things. I guess when you think about, as a leader, how do you design systems that allow people to do their best work without burning out? What do you think about? You guys have done an insanely good job of talking about, how you ramp people up, how you train them. Is there anything you do day to day or something within, the framework you set up for people in terms of what they need to do to allow those systems to exist?
Yeah, I think, having everybody understand, their own, their own workflow or, the steps that they need to take and being able to give them those tools has been helpful. I will say, like I said, technology is a big focus for us because we are at a point where if we don't do something with technology, it is going to be difficult to maintain the pace. So, I think we're trying to focus on, again, how do we take away some of that repetitive activity and be able to replace it with technology to give people, more time to focus. I do think from a leadership standpoint, though, it's important to recognize when a particular group is starting to burn out. I go back to this time of year, right? And I've said to more people than I can think of. I've said to people, I've been doing this for 30 years. This is the craziest first of the year I've ever seen in my entire 30-year career. And so, we have to, as the leaders of the group, have to recognize when the staff is really kind of hitting their wall. And so, we did quite a bit of overtime in the first month of the year. And, moving into February, we had to recognize that things might have to slow down a bit because we just can't have people working, the amount of time they were working. So we've scaled back, a bit on overtime and really trying to give staff the time to have work-life balance. And I think, the leaders of the organization are pretty good at recognizing when their teams are hitting that wall. As I said earlier, everybody jumps in. So if we see that one team is struggling, so, for example, intake is very focused on what they do, but, this time of year, we might have reauthorization doing the benefit investigation or have reauthorization doing the quoting of the benefits instead of just putting all of that back on intake to do. So really, again, just everybody kind of stepping up and trying to help out to make sure that if there's one group that's really struggling, we're going to support them through and let them have that work-life balance that's critical.
That's cool. I've heard the phrase, win as a team, lose as a team, which it seems like you guys embody pretty well. You step up when people
True.
are needing it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good phrase.
Are there any things you do in terms of intentionally rewarding or reinforcing culture to sort of encourage this sort of like help each other out, make sure that we come together to help in like times of need?
We do. I think, we have different kind of, bonus programs or spiffs or those types of things, which are kind of intended to help people or, help the group through maybe a tougher time. I think one of the things that we do really well is recognize the small wins. And so we have a program. It's not hard. It's called High Five. And so anybody can submit anybody else for a high five. So, a pharmacy technician can say, the reauthorization person was super helpful with me and this patient, and they can submit a high five and kind of outline what that person did, how, why they did it and why it made a difference. And, they get a small gift from the organization. It's nothing huge, but I think to me, recognizing like those small wins and small things that people do and being able to have your teammates recognize you, then it always having to come from management, I think is really kind of a cool program that we take advantage of.
That's very cool. We have something internally similar called Kudos, where we give each other kudos. It's great. I think people really enjoy that.
Well, that, and I think just, even if it's something as simple as like an email recognition of saying thank you.
Yeah.
And that, particularly this time of year where it is, challenging is being able to just drop something and say, hey, I see you and I recognize, the work that you're doing and thank you. So I think there's quite a bit of that, of people being very respectful and truly meaning it, being thankful for the other people that they work with, because, everybody has a responsibility. And if you do yours, it makes somebody else's job easier.
Yep. So I'm going to move into a little bit of a closing sort of reflection on some of the decisions you made at Nufactor. So looking back, what was some of the harder operational decisions you made that ultimately shaped Nufactor into what it is today?
That's an interesting question. And again, I'm gonna go back to my boss, right? So I mentioned I've been doing this for 30 some odd years. So not the full time at Nufactor. I've been here for 14 years. When I joined the organization 14 years ago, my boss, Patrick Schmidt, our CEO, he said to me, come in and observe. He said, I know that you have a lot of experience, you have a lot of background, but why don't you come in and observe for, 30, 60, 90 days, see what we do here, take what you've done previously and make us the best of the best. And that was fantastic advice. I came in and, this concept of every organization says, oh, our customer service is second to none. And I had that same thought with the previous organizations I was in. I came and joined here and I went, wow, this customer service really is second to none. So initially and ongoing, I have not had to make a lot of big operational changes. I'll say probably the biggest one that we've made is a little bit of the change to like the pharmacy structure. So it used to be not necessarily, pick a pharmacist, any pharmacist, but it wasn't dedicated. So, I think the one thing that we put in place since I joined is we have a dedicated admissions team. So that's admissions pharmacist, the nurse coordinating the care. The intake person is all dedicated to that patient as they onboard. And then once they get onboarded, they get transitioned to a second team. So they, their first experience is with just that admissions team that understands the complexities of admission. And then they move on to a team and they stay with that team for the remainder of their time on service. So again, that ability that they don't have to retell their story every time they talk to a new person at Nufactor. And so that was not a super hard change, but we've always done it that way. That you hear that a lot. Well, we didn't do it that way because we've always done it this way. And it took us a little while to get that, that change made. The other thing that change does is it also allows us, again, that ability to have more of a relationship with the prescriber office, because if they're dealing with the same pharmacist and the same nurse and the same re-auth person, they develop a relationship with those people over time. And so, that one-to-one relationship is not just with the salesperson. And, people do leave, right? So if your salesperson leaves the organization, you still have a great relationship with the pharmacist or the nurse or the re-auth person on the ops side with that prescriber office. So we try to broaden it to beyond just one person having that relationship.
That makes sense. If someone were to join Nufactor tomorrow, what would you hope they notice within their first 90 days? And what did you notice within your first, when you were observing? I guess you mentioned the customer experience was the highlight for you. Is that what other people notice? Or what do you get as feedback?
I think the two things that I would hope that people would notice in their first, 90 days, a couple things. I hope the first thing they notice is the culture of the company. And the culture of the company really is, patient first, and very focused on the team members. So, we joke with FFF Enterprises, there's a joke family, because, we look at everybody as family in the organization, just the culture. I would hope that they would also notice the training that they're provided in the first 90 days. Just again, not being thrown to the wolves to say, hey, you got a week of training and now pick up the phone and start making phone calls. So really, I think our goal is to try to set everybody up for success in their first 90 days and really make sure that they understand who we are, what we do, how we go about, why we go about things the way we go about them.
And for, future team members, for your team today, what are you most excited about where you're going to go in the next few years?
I think I'm excited about the technology. I think a lot of people maybe aren't. I think a lot of people are concerned, technology is going to replace my job, and that is not at all our focus. My focus is get technology, help us become more efficient, and give us more time to be able to have that one-on-one relationship with the patient. So if I'm having to be banging keys to enter something 3 different places, versus being able to have it, have some of it automated for you and give you that time back to be able to have a more meaningful conversation with the patient on the phone or, over Teams or via text or, whatever, however they want to communicate. So I think probably growing and expanding in our technology stack, I guess, is really what I'm looking forward to in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations are in this space, I think, of wanting to leverage technology to grow, the patient experience, the provider experience, really leveraging it to do that, like more of this, less of that, in terms of what the technology brings. And I agree, there's a lot of hesitancy, I think, in some organizations, at least with the staff involved and what their feelings are around it. But I think it starts to get overcome as soon as they see some of the new tasks that they might have on their plate or growth or whatever, and then that starts getting mitigated. So it just takes a little bit of time, but I don't think it is. I would say that Nufactor, though, in terms of adoption and things like this, your staff does not seem maybe it's internal, I don't know, but it doesn't seem like it really was an issue for people to adopt quickly and be on the, working with it and moving things forward. So I think, at least internally, it seems like you guys have a good setup for enabling technology.
Yeah. Well, and I think everybody sees that there's, we're sort of at the beginning, right? And at the end of the road, there's going to be things that make people's job easier. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm not going to have to answer 20 emails in the first 5 minutes of my job if I've got some automation and some technology. So that's a big goal. I'm most excited about getting our email volume down.
Yeah.
Sounds
All right.
silly, but,
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. Okay, so we're gonna go into a quick hit lightning round.
Okay.
One belief about healthcare you hold that most people in the industry disagree with.
Oh, that's a hard one. And I don't know how many people disagree or would agree with me on this one. I think the one belief I have about healthcare is that it has vastly become profit over patient. And I don't know how many people would agree with that, but and it's at all levels. It's at it's at the payer level, it's at the manufacturer level, it's at the provider level, it's at the government level, and it's just very disorganized, and it is very much provider over patient. And whether or not people agree with me or disagree with me, I don't know. Eventually we're going to have to flip that and become more patient focused and really drive good patient outcomes as opposed to profit. So
Yeah.
that's a tough one.
Capability healthcare organizations consistently underinvest in.
Oh, gosh, they're people. Honestly, I think if you don't really acknowledge the people who work for you, I mean, you can't. I mean, people have asked me, why are you successful? I'm successful because of the people that work with me and for me that make me successful. And if you don't invest and acknowledge and take care of the teammates, you're not going to succeed. That one is I think we underinvest in the teammates. And we try to not underinvest, but I think globally, I think people are undervalued. Yeah.
Related, talent lesson you learned the hard way.
Talent lesson I learned the hard way. I would say having multiple people in the interview process is critical. I think if you don't have multiple people interviewing, there's, somebody can miss a red flag very easily, or somebody can miss something that's, a character piece of somebody that maybe I didn't see, and somebody else says, but, they answered that question this way, and I think that this person is a great fit. And so I think having more than one person in the interview process is really critical to identifying the people that are going to be a fit for your organization.
Okay, awesome. So I guess that draws us to a conclusion. To bring it all to a close, really appreciated your thoughts on just investing in people, investing in process, investing in relationships. It's been an awesome learning experience even for me. And I think not just specialty operations focus, but just broadly, any leader in any organization can take a lot away from this particular one. So I really appreciate your insights and learnings on this one, Leslie. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Eesha. Thanks for the compliments. We appreciate it. We've got a great group.